Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Franchise Hockey Manager 9 playthrough of the Chicago Blackhawks. We are early in the 2025 offseason. I've already made a few offers to some free agents. We've got the rookie draft coming up tonight. We barely made the playoffs last season, ousted in the first round after winning the Stanley Cup a year earlier. So the goal is to really improve the team this offseason. And one thing that we've recently done is we brought on new offensive and skill coaches. One thing that I have seen commented on frequently at the out of the park developments message boards around Franchise Hockey Manager 9 is a lot of discussions around team harmony. And right now, our team harmony is pretty good. We do have one click that includes probably our two best players in Dylan Larkin and Patrick Kane. So we're going to have to kind of let that click run its course. But when I bring on coaches onto the team, always look for people with really good skills to be the key coaches of goalies, defense, offense, and skills. But what I hadn't been paying as much attention to in the past was player management. And that is something that can have an impact on clicks in team harmony. So I recently brought on Mark Retke and Bob Bauer to take over as our offensive coach and our skill coach, because those two guys have very good in the case of Retke and good in the case of Bauer player management skills. The guys who I used to have in those roles were actually a little better in terms of the pure coaching ability for those positions, but their player management skills were poor and very poor. So I think hopefully this will help improve the locker room a little bit on the margin. By now, the fact that all of our assistant coaches are good or very good in terms of player management, except for Jeff Blashill and myself, who are only above average at this point, but still moving in the right direction, hopefully. So one minor thing that we did also, taking a look at free agency, have made a couple other offers. We talked about Nico Sturm. His price keeps going up, and talked about him in our last episode. I don't mean to imply that I've talked about him in the last couple of minutes. His price just keeps going up for a center in his early 30s, not someone that we're going to chase. We do have the offer out to Travis Konechny. That would be our big acquisition for this offseason if we're able to bring him on board. We did just make an offer to bring back Jacob Skarek as our backup goalie. And then Dominic James is a player who we had drafted several years ago that we've made an offer to bring on board. And you may remember in our last episode when I was rushing around, I didn't make offers by June 30th of the year to a couple of our other prospects. I went back and looked at the video of the last episode, and Julien Hebert and Antonin Barreau were the two players that we had picked, I believe, both in the second round. Fortunately, they were both still free agents. So I've made offers to both of them, hoping to bring them back on board. You can see right now we are not considered the top team for either of them. But hopefully if I can get at least one of them signed, then I can just kind of let Jagger Firkus, who I had thought about signing to just replace the fact that I had stupidly lost guys who we had rights to, potentially let him go away if we're able to sign one of the other guys. Although right now, unfortunately, we're in a battle to sign them rather than having their rights like we did just 6 days ago if I wasn't lazy and rushing in my management to the team. But clearly the big things that we've got to figure out in the near term are whether we get Konechny signed. We're viewed as the top team for him right now. And whether we can get Skarek back as our backup goalie for next year. And right now, HCD, which I assume is maybe a Swedish club or a Czech club, I guess. Oh yeah, it looks like that may be his old club, HC Dukla Jelava. That may be who he's looking to sign with right now, sign back with them. So hopefully we'll be able to convince him to stay in the NHL as our backup. He did want a guarantee that he would be the starting goalie. In the ultimate offer that we made to him, we said he would be the backup goalie, so it probably doesn't work in our favor in terms of being able to sign him, but also don't want him to be angry for 4 years if he's a backup. And now we move on to the rookie draft. We do have a first rounder, a second rounder, and then nothing until the 6th and the 7th, where we've got a lot of picks, our own 6th, and then 7ths that we picked up from 3 other teams and a 6th from St. Louis. So we'll be active at the beginning. We had the 17th pick overall, as we were the weakest of the playoff teams in the league last year in terms of our record. So the hope is that there will be someone interesting for us to think about with that 17th pick in the draft. And we've simmed ahead to our 17th pick. At least according to potential ratings, there's a few interesting players out there. Tend to try to go with North American players in the first round whenever possible. It just seems like it's easier to assimilate them, easier to ensure that they are going to sign with your team when it's time for them to sign. Usually don't have a language issue. So would think that the center Brigley, the left defenseman Sharp, or the goalie Daigle would be players that I may think about. Rare to take a goalie, at least for me, this early in the draft, but certainly in terms of ability and potential, he stands out. Looking at our scout suggestions, Daigle and Sharp, 2 of the players that we talked about, are on the top of his list. Safe suggestions, Daigle, Donahue, Sharp again. Risky suggestions, Daigle is also there as the second riskiest. Looks like the goalies tend to be pretty risky. So we'll do a little deeper digging into the personalities of all these guys and let you know what we decide. So Gabriel Daigle, only 18 years old, not going to turn 19 until early stages of the next season. Projected to be number 27 pick. Obviously has a lot of work to do, some pretty solid mental ratings for an 18-year-old though. Coming off a year where he was 32, 18, and 1 for Victoriaville. Number 1 North American goalie. Has the potential to be better than Skarek. I would certainly hope so if we're going to use a first-round draft pick on him. Similar style to Skarek. Not that loyalty, stays out of trouble on the ice. Definitely a decent prospect, no question about that. Victor Eklund, assume he's from Sweden, yes. Projected to be the 3rd pick in the draft. Wow, and he's around at number 17. That's interesting. Does already speak a little bit of English. Guess not surprising, given that he's been in the WHL for the last 2 years. Looking at the scouting report, Scout says he could be around the skill level of Patrick Kane. That is certainly interesting. Nothing about his personality really stands out. Looking at his profile, looks like he can potentially be a very dynamic offensive player. Not all that great mentally, sound physically, and has his areas defensively where he's pretty competent. So looks like a pretty well-rounded potential player. Big question is how much his mental ratings may improve as he gets a little older. Will Sharp, the left defenseman, probably a pretty big hurdle for us to draft another left defenseman this high. Interesting that the mock draft has predicted him to be both 19 and number 18. He's going to Yale, so he's a smart young fellow. Looks like a little more of an offensive defenseman than a defensive defenseman, although he's already excellent at stick checking. Pretty strong physically, decent mental ratings for a player of that age. Definitely an interesting prospect. Very high on IQ tests. Everyone loves him, avoids dwelling on his failures. Definitely a solid prospect. Talon Brigley, 20-year-old center. Scout thinks he's got a lot of potential, but he's got a long way to go with a lot of these skills. Projected him to be pick 130. Yeah, I think we can probably move on. Smart player, handles constructive criticism well, not that loyal to teams, but I think he's definitely a notch below these guys, although we think he's got a lot of potential. Probably going to be similar here with the two Finnish goalies, Kanerva. Yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of work to do. You know, one of these guys, number 5 amongst the Canadian goal or the European goaltenders, could be better than Mackenzie Blackwood someday. So he's an interesting prospect. I think it's a little early to take him now. And Lauri Milila, another Finnish goalie, projected to be pick number 170. So I would think that, and number 6 among the European goalies. So these guys both have pretty high potential. They are not probably guys that I would take this early. So it's going to come down to Daigle, Eklund, and Sharp. I'm intrigued by Daigle because for an 18-year-old, pretty good mental ratings, and he's already coming along pretty good in terms of his physical skills as far as playing the goalie position. But I'm not going to lie, the fact that, and the mock draft is, you know, certainly not perfect, but the fact that he was projected to go 3rd in the mock draft and he's still around is interesting to me. The fact that our scout thinks he could be as good as Patrick Kane someday certainly gets my attention. And I do love the fact that even though he's only 18 years old, he's already a pretty dynamic offensive player with pretty good physical skills. Hopefully the mental traits come along. I mean, he's kind of acceptable right now, but certainly doesn't have the profile of someone who would ever be a captain or is going to be a great influence in the locker room. I think it's always good to have good, strong forwards. So from that perspective, we're going to go with Victor Eklund here in the first round. I think there will be an opportunity potentially, unlikely to get Daigle, but certainly if we want to go for a goalie later, I think Kanerva and Milila, I'm sure I'm pronouncing that wrong, could be around further. The issue we do have is that we've got a 2nd round pick and then we're waiting until the 6th. So we've got to make this 2nd pick of ours in the draft count because that's probably going to be the last potential impact player we'll be able to pick up. So we will sim ahead to our next pick. And as expected, Kanerva and Malila are still there. Brigley is also there. So those are the highest potential players left. You can see there's a lot of players with more ability than those guys. So I'm going to spend a little time thinking about who to take and doing a little research on the players, and I'll let you know what I decide. And we're going to pick a center here with our 2nd pick. We're going to go with Mathis Dubé. Only turned 18, I guess, almost a year ago. So he'll be 19, by the first month of this coming season. But as an 18-year-old last year, had 22 goals and 44 assists in 65 games for Rimouski Oceanic. Pretty interesting offensive prospect. Scouting report is pretty solid. Smart player, counted on to avoid dwelling on his failures, doesn't let criticism get him down. He's not really projected to go anywhere in the draft. Ranked 58th among North American skaters. But I kind of like his personality, like his offensive profile, and don't think that he's going to be there in the 6th round, whereas I do think there is a chance that one of the high potential goalies that we're still kind of monitoring from Finland, Kanerva or Melilla, it's possible that one of those guys will be there in the 6th round when we make our next picks. So we're going to roll the dice, go with Dubé to follow up our pick earlier of Eklund, and looking like we are trying to help the front line with the decisions that we're making thus far in the draft. And unfortunately, here in the 6th round, both of the goalies are gone at this point that we were hoping one might fall to us. Brigley, who was one of the higher potential players that was left when we were in the 1st round, is still here. I think we'll pick him in the 6th. Really just trusting our scouts. We see a little more potential in him than most other teams do. We've got a pretty good scouting team. Obviously, he's got a lot of growth, but for a 6th round pick, willing to take a flyer on a player like Talon Brigley. So the draft is over. We weren't considered to have one of the best or the worst drafts, given that we were picking 17th with our first pick and only had a 1st and 2nd rounder before those 2 6th rounders and the 3 7th rounders. Wouldn't think that we would really be on the list of the best drafts with that type of limited draft capital we had, but good to see that at least we're not listed among the worst either. So with the draft now behind us, going to be time to start simming forward and seeing what happens with some of those players that we're trying to bring on the team, most notably Travis Konechny and Skarek to be our backup goaltender. And Nico Sturm ended up signing with Seattle. Let's see what kind of money he ended up getting. He told us he was looking for close to $3 million a year. And he ended up pretty much getting it. I mean, I guess not really. Average about 2.7 over 3 years, but still more than we were willing to pay for the 30-year-old. More importantly, though, we got Konechny signed, so he's going to have an important role as a winger on our team. You can see we got Skarek signed. We got the youngster Dominic James signed. Julian A. Bear looks like we may be able to get him signed, which would be good because we did lose out on Verreau, who's a guy who we could have signed if we just weren't stupid. And we were going to let Jagger Furcus go. But hopefully, at the very least, we'll get A. Bear signed and at least get one of our 2 second-round picks from back in the 2023 draft signed. It's unfortunate that we're going to lose Verreau, but it is what it is. And you can see that with Skarek now on the roster and Konechny on the roster also, we've got 22 players at $80.365 million. So we've got just about enough money to bring one more forward onto the team. And then that'll probably be the extent of our main activity. Obviously, the roster could change a little bit on the margins depending on how some of our younger players look in training camp when we bring more players around, and there's always the opportunity to fix or improve the back end of the roster a little bit when we get to waivers right before the season begins. But I think with bringing Skarek back as our backup goaltender to Mackenzie Blackwood and getting Konechny signed to give us another solid NHL quality winger who can play on either the right or the left side, I think that we're kind of have already done our heavy lifting for the off season, even though it's already only July 7th. And we did get the youngster Julien Hebert signed, so that's, I guess, one positive piece of news. Don't know that he's ever really going to become a big-time player for us. You can see last year he split at the age of 21 between Hartford and the AHL, and then the semi-pro team when he wasn't on the AHL roster. Don't think he's a big-time prospect for us, but at least want to give the guys that were taken in the first couple of rounds of the draft at least a chance to see if they can turn into something. Presumably we'll start him in the ECHL this year, where hopefully he can get some regular ice time. And this is unfortunate and a bit surprising. Patrick Kane, the veteran, involved in an off-ice incident that the fans and teammates are displeased about. Rifts have appeared on the team. Several players pretty upset with him. So as much as I was talking in the beginning of this episode about team harmony, we have a lot of open hostility towards involving our captain right now, which is not a good situation. Wow. What do we have him for? 2 years left on his contract at $6.5 million. Don't know that we can afford to move on from a player who is so good offensively, but apparently Patrick has done something pretty bad that has many of his teammates really sour with him. Something we're going to have to monitor. I mean, it seems if the open hostility sounds really negative, and it seems like if it impacts us significantly on the ice, then we're going to have to do something about it. And I mean, honestly, he is the center of all of the conflict. And it's going to persist for a while. So this will be a good test of the upgrades that we made to some of the player management on our team among our coaches. Definitely have an opportunity to deal with a major crisis right now. Since we're not going to be playing any games for a few months, not going to do anything right now. We'll just kind of see how the situation festers and whether we need to take some action down the line involving our captain. And the Hurricanes are shopping Marty Necas. He's no Patrick Kane, but he does tend to stay out of trouble. I don't know if I'd even trade Kane straight up for Necas, and no certainty that Carolina would trade him either. They are a win-now team. Yeah, we don't have any single player that would make the trade work. I don't think I'm going to trade away Kane yet. But at least see what they would say to that. He's got the no trade, of course. So yeah, we'd have to look for, it looks like the Sabres or any of the kind of other New York, New Jersey teams in the northeastern part of New York. northeastern part of the United States, with the New York Rangers, Islanders, and the Jersey Devils, and then a few other teams. So our options there will definitely be limited if we need to move on from him. I guess we can see what's on the trading block from some of those teams. Islanders would trade away Anthony Duclair. Decent offensive player. Again, he's no Patrick Kane. Also signed for a couple years. He's younger, making less money. I hate to move on from Kane. But I'll at least check in on Duclair. I don't know that I would trade Kane for him. No players that would make that work either. That's a little bit surprising. It's hardly likely that they would accept Patrick Kane for Anthony Duclair, even though they've got Anthony Duclair on the trade block. So we're not going to do anything right away. We'll just kind of, like I said, let it fester for a while and see what happens. And a little bit of good news here at the end of July. Dylan Larkin finally ready to return from that broken bone in the elbow that sidelined him right before the end of the regular season and during the playoffs. Obviously, will be nice to have the 53-goal scorer back, leading our lineup at the beginning of the upcoming season, particularly if everyone on the team happens to hate Patrick Kane. At least hopefully Larkin will be a productive player for us and liked by his teammates. And we did actually recently promote him to assistant captain, given that we had made the trade in our past episode of longtime defenseman and assistant captain. Had an opening in Larkin with his good team player, leadership, temperament, and professionalism ratings, and the fact that he is by far our most dynamic offensive player. Pretty easy decision to give him an A. And we've got 4 new Hall of Famers, a couple of Patricks, Eliash and Marleau, Zdeno Chara, and John Van Beesbroek are the new Hall of Famers in 2025. And the locker room is quickly getting out of control with a new clique formed. I think it also includes a lot of the guys that hate Patrick Kane, so that's probably not awesome. Konechny, Entwistle, Caleb Jones, and Mackenzie Blackwood. And Konechny, Entwistle are on the list of players who have problems with Patrick Kane. And you can see we are now at a point where there is just disruptive hostility in terms of our locker room. So it's going to be interesting to try to manage through this. And now in mid-August, Larkin is back, clean bill of health. Looks like he's still a pretty effective offensive player, so that is all positive. Not so positive, the team harmony, although it does appear that we're getting a little better since the last time we checked in. Hopefully the intensity of the conflicts will continue to mitigate. We've got 2s and 3s down here and 4s and 5s up there as far as the conflicts. So I guess the one positive thing is that a lot of this happened in the off season. So hopefully we'll be in a better spot with the team and Mr. Kane by the time we get through training camp. And as the calendar turns to September, we're going to crank our investment in player happiness up as much as possible now that the players are going to be coming to camp in a few days and beginning the preseason. Hopefully that'll also help with some of the issues we have as far as team cohesion. Going to still not invest anything extra into game promotions and arena operations since we won't actually have any games that count until early October, and don't need to really get the scouting up to a huge level since there's still not going to be too many games being played. Checking in on team harmony, it seems like it is slowly moving in a better direction. We've got a few people who the intensity of their hostility with Kane is down to a 3. So we're moving in a little bit better direction. I think we may have, I don't want to say dodged a bullet because we still have got a pretty bad locker room at this point, but the fact that a lot of this stuff happened in the off season apparently has given us some time for feelings to moderate a bit before these guys are really around each other all the time, and hopefully our captain will be able to win the locker room back over. And taking a look at our roster, still just have 22 players who we think are going to be on the NHL squad, have a little bit of salary cap room left. We need to add a forward. Marner is still out there. He's obviously looking for an insane amount of money. Although he's down to $6 million. Whoa, that's interesting. Especially because it's right about the amount of money that Patrick Kane is making. I didn't realize he had come down that much. I think when we looked at him in the last episode, he was looking for, I believe, like $13 million a year. Wonder what these guys are looking for, too. The big goalies. A lot more reasonable money. Wow. We may be in a position to really revamp the team here just 10 days before, or 11 days, I guess, before the preseason starts. But we've got some decisions to make because with what Kane is making, we could sign Marner for less. And he's younger, and he's not hated by everybody else on the team. I hate to just move on from Patrick Kane, but it may be the right thing for the franchise. I mean, for around $6 million, how do we not make an offer to Marner? Does want a no movement clause. Changed his role. Let me, I don't remember what it was. Okay, I guess it was offensive forward. Makes sense. $5.95 million a year for 5 years. A little less than what he's looking for. He does say he wants a no movement clause, but we'll try to maintain as much flexibility as we can. All right, you want the no movement clause. We're not going to let that hold us up. We'll submit this offer to Marner. This is really interesting. I've just been kind of simming quickly through the last month and a half or so because we had kind of done the big moves that I wanted to do and that I thought we could afford, and was coming back to really just look to see if there were any decent players that I could sign for kind of $1 million, $1.2 million to kind of fill out the roster, and if there was nobody there that fit the bill as far as a forward, then I was just going to figure we'd pick up the last guy for our roster through waivers in several weeks. But the fact that Marner is still out there and he's looking for half of what he was earlier is extremely interesting. And I'm not going to lie, Shesterkin and Samsonov are also pretty interesting at their much lower numbers. $4.5 million for Shesterkin. He's going to be 30 shortly, but he's still a pretty big upgrade from Mackenzie Blackwood, just in terms of his skills. I mean, we can look at them side to side, but it's not going to be a nice picture for Blackwood. I mean, you look at the mental ratings, and they actually do, on balance, I'd say favor Blackwood a bit, but it's not overwhelming. But then you look at the goalie ratings, and with the exception of rebounds, Shesterkin is better than Blackwood in everything. He's about a year older, but we're going to be losing Blackwood at the end of this season anyways. Wonder what he's looking for in terms of a contract. I mean, he's looking for almost $7 million a year for 4 years if we were to bring him back. I mean, Samsonov is also really good, and kind of the best balance, perhaps, of really good mental and really good goalie ratings. You know, if I compare Samsonov to Blackwood, on balance, you know, Samsonov is better with the mental ratings, and it's kind of a closer battle with the goalie ratings, but overall, I'd say it definitely favors Samsonov, who also happens to be a little younger. But Shesterkin, it's hard to say no to him for the same money that we're paying Blackwood right now. I think we've got to put an offer out there. I didn't really expect anything like this in free agency. But if we can get Shesterkin for less than we're playing Blackwood, we just trade away Blackwood because we're not going to be able to sign him for that big money he's looking for next year. Always trying to save a little money. Can we get him for $4.5 million a year? And can we get him for 4 years instead of 3? Since he's waited so long, and we'll give him the no trade clause. He's willing to think about it, so we'll submit those offers. So we will obviously have to reshuffle our roster since we are pretty close to the salary cap, but Shesterkin is less expensive than Blackwood. And if we did decide to move on from Kane, Marner at this point is less expensive than him and 8 years younger and probably a better player right now at the same position. And everybody doesn't hate him. It's a horrible way for Patrick Kane's career to potentially end with the Blackhawks, but if we can bring on Marner and Shesterkin and get younger on the front line and get better at goaltender, these are potentially huge moves for the Blackhawks. And our clique is growing larger. Shesterkin's thinking about the contract. Marner's thinking about the contract. Disruptive hostility. Oof. And if we moved on from Kane and Blackwood when we bring on those players, that would weaken the cliques. In addition to getting rid of Kane, getting rid of a lot of the disruption in the locker room. I hate that the game is making me do this, but if we can sign both of those players, I think it's goodbye to the living legend and goodbye to the goalie that's been a cornerstone of what we have accomplished the last few seasons. And out of nowhere, Mitch Marner has been signed with the Chicago Blackhawks. So he gives us a big time player. You can see he had an off year this past year with just 68 points, but scored 113 and 105 the previous 2 seasons. For the amount of money that we're paying him, less than $6 million a year, I think that is a huge acquisition for us. But it means that the captain's time is over, because that will end all of these conflicts, and it will weaken the clique, and it will save us some money, and it will make us younger and better. And with Marner, we've actually got another leader in terms of his personality. Fantastic leadership scores, actually. I think we could give him the C right ahead of Dylan Larkin, quite honestly, who's got really good mental ratings, but not at the same level of Marner's. So the question now is just what, if anything, can we get from Patrick Kane at this late stage of the offseason? Especially because he's got a no trade to an awful lot of teams. We'll shop him. 3rd round, defenseman and a 6th rounder, defenseman and a 7th rounder. Ooh, Adam Pelech. Nice stay-at-home defenseman. Excellent defensively. Probably making more money than we can afford. Yeah, almost the same money that we just signed Marner for. I think I'd love to get him out of the Western Conference, but the 3rd round pick from Dallas is the best that we've got. It'll help team harmony. It's obviously going to hurt our job security, but we did just get a +10 for bringing Marner on board, so we'll probably just give all that back by trading away the very popular Kane. It would be interesting, though, given they had that big off-ice incident that impacted fan happiness, if maybe moving him off the roster doesn't have as big an impact. That would be a nice feature for the game. I have a feeling it might not be that refined, but we're going to trade him to the Stars for a 3rd rounder. You've had a brilliant career. I never thought that you would not retire as a Blackhawk, Patrick. Had 3 nice years with us ever since we traded away Jonathan Taves and gave him the C. But Marner's better, Marner's cheaper, Marner's younger, and Marner isn't hated by half of the locker room. So Patrick Kane, thank you for a brilliant career in Chicago, and enjoy finishing up your career in Dallas. Yeah, we ended up losing 10 points for trading him away, so team happiness still not great. Team harmony still is disruptive hostility, but the conflicts are gone. One of the cliques is weaker, and we are going to give Mitch Marner the C. I know that's a bit of a bold move, given that we've got Larkin and Horvat, who's been wearing an A for a couple, I think 2.5 seasons for us, or just 2 seasons for us now. and then we just promoted Larkin. But Marner has taken over everything that Patrick Kane used to be for this team. And you can see we're in a little bit better of a salary situation. And now the question is whether we can make a second huge signing in September and bring on Shesterkin. And unfortunately, it looks like Shesterkin just ghosted us. He told us that he was going to think it over and get back to us. And then, as you can see, he just went and signed with Vancouver without even talking to us. They did give him a lot more money than we were going to, so I think that does make sense that he... Still kind of a dick move that he ghosted us, but we were offering him, if I remember correctly, only like $4.5 million a year for 4 years. So we were trying to get him on the bargain, and it didn't work out. So means we will have Blackwood back in goalie for this coming year, and we'll have to figure out next steps next off season. But with the money that we did save by moving on to Marner from Kane, we may be able to bring Alec Formenton back. He's a restricted free agent, been on the team with us for the last few years. Was looking for pretty big money, hasn't gotten any offers, and now he's only looking for $1.7 million a year for 3 years. So that is much more reasonable than the number he had been looking for before. I want to say that I think, and it's been a while, so I don't remember, but I had thought he was looking for like $4+ million a year at one point, and we put the auto qualify on him. And although it says auto qualify off now, but I was pretty sure he was a restricted free agent. I could be misremembering, who knows. But we'll offer him $1.6 million a year for 3 years. Wants a little more than that, 1.65, and he is willing to think about it. That would fill kind of the 23rd roster spot, give us the 14 forwards that we would like, along with 7 defensemen and 2 goalies on the 23-man roster. And we've still got flexibility with some of these players to send somebody down to the AHL and or make a trade if we see someone real interesting who does happen to hit the waiver wire as we get through the preseason. But obviously there's still no guarantees that we're going to get Formenton back either. But we will find out shortly, hopefully. And Formenton quickly signed with us, so that's good news. We've got a 23-man potential roster right now with a $82.215 million salary hit, so we can fit everyone under the cap. Goalies basically going to be the same as last year, and obviously this can change coming out of the preseason, and if we have any injuries. Going to have the rookie Korchinski hopefully up as a new defenseman for us. And then we'll have Formenton back as a winger. The newly added Konechny is hopefully a player who will give us some offense that we could definitely use. And then we've moved on from Patrick Kane and surprisingly upgraded to Mitch Marner very late in free agency. So different looking team than a year ago. The goalies will be exactly the same. The defense a little younger with Korchinski, and hopefully with the additions of Konechny and Marner, the offense will be a little better and a little younger than it was a year ago. And we're nearing the end of training camp, although we've still got games left at home against Edmonton and Detroit. Got the training camp development report. You can see some of our young players, Nolan Allen, Luke Coughlin, Colton Dock, Mackenzie Entwistle, Gavin Hayes, Dylan Holloway, Quinn Hughes, Kevin Korchinski, in particular, improving in a lot of areas. Regula, Reichel, Rolston, Matteo Rotundi, the youngster. Obviously not going to be with the big club, but really big improvement with him. For him, kind of playing with the big club here over the last couple of weeks through training camp. A few of the older players moving in the wrong direction, which is not unexpected, but obviously a pretty successful training camp for the Blackhawks. Season ticket numbers. Interesting. 18,756. I think that's probably the best in hockey. Luxury box sales, 166. Season tickets, yep, once again, the Blackhawks are number one in the United Center. So hopefully we, with the strong season ticket sales, will continue to sell out every game in the upcoming season. And training camp and the preseason are now over. You can see it was a pretty successful preseason for the Blackhawks. We had a record of 5-2 overall. We lost to the Islanders and we lost to the Kings in home series with both of those teams. And so we split those series, and then we also won games against Arizona, Edmonton, and Detroit. So now we've got about 10 days until the start of the season for us on the 2nd of October at Winnipeg. So we are going to make some final cuts to get this 32-man roster down to 23 players, and then see what things look like in the waiver wire. And there may be an opportunity for us to add some talent that rounds out the back end of this roster. But before we make those final cuts, I just wanted to comment on one thing that I saw in the comments on a previous episode. It was kind of a question about the annual finances and the annual wage budget and whether it impacted the salary cap. And it does not impact the salary cap. Everyone's going to have $82.5 million to spend on contracts when they have to get their roster under the salary cap in the coming weeks. The reason to spend some points or save some points on the wage budget is it does give you some extra flexibility when you're kind of building your roster. If you've got a bigger, not explaining this well, but if you've got a bigger wage budget, you can, during the off season, be signing a lot of other players before you've traded players away, and it gives you more capacity to have a bunch of big contracts on the books for a small period of time until the season starts. So I don't think there's a ton of value in it because I generally try to manage myself right at the cap throughout the offseason. As you saw with bringing on Marner, just quickly traded away Patrick Kane. But if you want to go and sign a bunch of big free agents and then trade people away and really churn your roster, having the opportunity to have some extra money in the wage budget does give you that opportunity in the offseason to maybe not plan your roster out as specifically and make some huge offers to free agents, and then just kind of get the roster and the salary cap back under the cap. So I don't know if that was a good explanation or not, but that's what the wage budget is used for essentially. But everyone still needs to get their salary under the salary cap by the time the season is ready to begin, which is almost the point that we are at now. So unfortunately for Mr. Kallgren, he is going to be going back to the AHL. A lot of the young defenders, Coughlin and Rotundi, going to start both of those guys out in the ECHL, see how they do there. Nolan Allen also going to be cut, but we will be sending him to the AHL and to Rockford. Adam Wilsby is a guy who will need to clear waivers, but we are also going to send him down, which will allow us to keep the youngster Kevin Korchinski up as our potentially seventh defenseman. So pretty easy to get down to 7 defensemen and 2 goalies, and now we've got some work to do to get down to 14 everyday position players, or forwards. So we need to cut a few more guys. Lucas Reichel will be going back to Rockford, and a lot of these guys will ultimately need to clear waivers. Danny O'Regan, versatile forward, but not really NHL quality at this point. Ryder Rolston, who was in the ECHL for us last year and was reasonably productive, I guess. 35 points, including 17 goals in 67 games, isn't bad. The minus 17 was not impressive. We'll start him off in the AHL, see how he functions there. And then the last cut is going to be Colton Dock, a youngster who did spend some time up on the big club last year. Hasn't really been able to find a full-time job with us, though. And that'll take us down to 23 players, and it's the 23 that we expected, because you can see our salary is the 82,215 that we were thinking that we would be at. So no shocks in the final cuts for the Blackhawks as we get ready for the regular season. Now it's just a matter of seeing what happens in the waivers. And as I noted, several of those guys that we just cut, specifically Adam Wilsby, Danny O'Regan, Eric Kallgren, and Lucas Reichel, will need to clear waivers. So we'll see if any of our guys get claimed, and we're going to have the opportunity to maybe try to claim some guys who could help us as well. And no huge talents on waivers, but certainly seeing Cole Sillinger on waivers from the Blue Jackets is interesting. Our scouts think he's got a decent amount of potential, pretty good ability too, and we could kind of use another center / winger. I mean, we think he's got 4.5 star potential. His contract is enough that it's not going to be easy to just fit him there, although the cap hit only $1.305 million, so that definitely helps. But I can't imagine that we are going to get him, because we'll be picking 17th, I believe, based on last year. But looking at our roster, some of the kind of back end guys, I don't think we'd be able to cut Cotter. I think we'd be just a little bit over the cap if we did, but he would be an obvious guy to cut. But honestly, if we could bring him on over Dylan Holloway, we could always send Gavin Hayes back down. I don't think he needs to clear waivers. No, not waiver eligible. I think we're at the very least going to put in a claim on him again. I don't think it will go through. I would have to think that someone else is going to claim him. But if not, and he's a pretty good two-way forward. Has a little bit of a temper, but does stay out of trouble on the ice overall. Again, I don't imagine. I would think that there's going to be a lot of demand for a 22-year-old player like him on waivers, but we will certainly put in the claim on Sillinger, Maverick Bork. Not a horrible prospect. Don't know that we're going to chase after him, though. A 31-year-old Liam O'Brien. Not all that exciting. We'll see what happens with Sillinger. Like I said, I think it's extremely unlikely that we'll get him, but would be a nice get if we could. And I'm shocked we did get Cole Sillinger off waivers. I don't know how he made it to us, and we're going to have to do some jockeying of the roster because We are way over now. He's more expensive than I thought he would be. Yeah, I mean, he's more like the 2.4 million that it says he makes. I don't know why it was listed. Maybe that was his cap hit for his old team for some reason was lower, but I still think for $2.4 million, though, it's a pretty interesting player for us to bring on board. We're just probably going to have to move on from somebody like Taylor Radish, which we don't love doing. Boy, looking at the way the salaries line up, though, that's the most obvious move for us to make, is to move on from Radish. And I do like him, but I don't think he's as good as Cole Sillinger, or at least he doesn't have the same potential. And Radish is a guy who, when he has played, his stamina is only a 13. Hasn't been a guy who can play every day for us. I mean, we're kind of stuck at this point. We've got to do something because we can't do anything with Sillinger at this point. We've put in the claim on him, so he's ours. And I just don't think there's any other player. In terms of the money, it's the only logical move to make. I guess we could move on from Dickinson. But that would not quite get us under the cap. So let's see what, if anything, we can get for Taylor Radish in a trade. Maybe a move that we end up regretting. But again, the potential for Sillinger is just so high. Radish, we kind of know what he is. He's a good, solid NHL player. And he had a great year for us in the 2023-24 Stanley Cup season. Regressed last year when I think he was getting a little, only 5 seconds less playing or ice time, so not a huge difference there. But he's been a good player for us. But Sillinger just gives us more youth on the front line, which is something we really need. And he also has the potential to develop into a difference maker. So we'll see what, if anything, we can get for Radish at this point. There's a decent amount of interest. A lot of players would love to see a 23-year-old Elliot Desnoyers. I want to just see what we can get in terms of a draft pick, hopefully from somebody. Somebody please offer me a draft pick. I don't need players. I don't need players. No one offering a draft pick. Tyson Jugnoth. At least he'd be a minor leaguer. But look at some of these younger guys. Mikey Milne. Not a bad player. Carter Savoy. Decent offensive player. Tyson Jugnoth, left defenseman. Send him back to the minors. I'll try to discuss the trade with somebody else and just see what I can get in terms of a draft pick. We're definitely not going to be picking up 27-year-old defenseman Mario Ferraro, although he is a nice stay-at-home defenseman. Making too much money. But what kind of draft pick could we get from the Islanders for him? I'll be greedy and ask for a third. Oh, it says they probably will accept it. Oh, but that's because we're taking on the salary of Ferraro. And who do they have that's just kind of an old, useless player that they have rights to? Christian Krieger. Very likely that they'll accept that. Could we possibly get a second-round pick out of the Islanders? Huh. Well, this is just crap. Because they shouldn't be giving us a first and a second round pick for him. So I am not going to. I mean, Taylor Radish is a good player, but he's not that good. How can we be getting a... Yeah, that, maybe he is. It seems... And maybe they really want to get rid of the rights for that guy, Krieger. I'll take a guy who's got a little bit better player. Blade Jenkins. Okay, and now the first round pick is well balanced. They just really wanted to get rid of the rights to Christian Krieger for some reason. But it seems like a little bit of a scam to also get a first round pick out of it. But they will probably accept the second rounder. I'd love to get a second rounder out of this. Offer the trade. Ooh, they already have 50 players under contract. Well, why don't you guys fix that? Maybe that's why we can't get the deal done. So is there some player under contract that we can pick up who's kind of useless instead? What if we take Kieran Gallant off of your team? Okay, you just acquired him, so you don't want to trade him, but he doesn't really seem like he's all that big a prospect. What about the goalie Visa Vendenpa? All right, well, you just acquired all of these guys that aren't that good. Trying to help you here by giving you Taylor Radish, a guy who can help you right now. What about Bodie Wild? All right, doesn't think that they'll accept it, but what if we take out Blade Jenkins? They probably will accept that, so that would be a trade for a trade. Bodie Wild does give us kind of a defenseman who we wouldn't mind having in our system in the minor leagues. All right, let's see if that works. Ooh, we want to make it work now, though. I don't have time to... Or I do have time. I got a couple days, right? Yeah, we've still got a couple days to get this under, so in worst case scenario, we can go execute on one of those other trades. Let's see if maybe we can get a draft pick for Radish. I don't love giving him up. But as I said, I do think adding Sillinger makes our team better for the longer term because he's a player who's got the type of upside that not a lot of guys on our roster really have at this point. All right, and now we've got too many players on our active roster, so we'll just send down Korchinski initially. But now the question is whether it's going to yell at us for being over the cap because we, although the season isn't starting today for us, I think it is starting for other teams today. Yeah, we've got to get under cap now. So we're going to have to figure out how to make this deal work today with one of these other teams. But we can do that. So we'll take a look at the Sabres and see if we can get a pick from them. We do not want Henry Jokalaju. I know I pronounced that wrong. But we would love to take your second round pick. And do you have the rights to someone who's old and useless? Oh, you've got rights to lots of players that are old and useless. What if we took William Warge-Crew off your team? Only get well balanced with him. All right, do you have anyone who's less useful? Not really. What about the aging Vasily Glotov? The Islanders look like the team that really wanted him. We've already made an offer to them. What about the Capitals? You guys really want him, don't you? We don't want Kevin Rooney. Did screw this up by not just making sure we got the deal done with the Islanders and figuring out what I needed to make it work. That could end up costing us here. Who do you have that's old and no good? Tobias Geiser. They can't add that much salary. All right. Well, I'm going to keep working on this, see if I can come up with something. All right, and now I totally screwed things up because as I was trying to click through to discuss the trade, I clicked on complete the trade by mistake with the Vegas Golden Knights. So that is clearly a sign that I should be stopping this episode because I've just taken on a horrible contract. And now I need to trade Zach Whitecloud away immediately. Fortunately, there are some teams that are interested in him. Oh, and we can actually just get a draft pick and move on. So it would have been nice if I would have had time to figure out whether I could have gotten that trade through with the Islanders. I definitely screwed this up. But we'll go ahead and complete the trade, get the 7th round pick from the Flyers. And that now we'll have our roster at 22 players. We can bring the young defenseman Korchinski back up to Chicago. And we have our active roster the way we want it with Sillinger on the team rather than Radish. The issue I was running into when I was discussing trades with a lot of the teams is that even though it's only progressed a couple of days since those offers were made, everyone was getting their salaries under the salary cap, and nobody had the opportunity to really take on the salary of Radish anymore. What I should have done when I was talking to the Islanders, and I had the potential to get a 2nd round pick for Radish, which I totally screwed up. I should have clicked the make this work button and find out what I needed to put in to get the deal done right then and there rather than waiting around for them to respond, given that we were so close to the start of the regular season. So that was a silly rookie mistake by me that costed me a bit. That said, when all is said and done, I still think we're better with Sillinger than we are with Radish, and we ended up adding a 7th round pick for our troubles. And our recent new addition, Mitch Marner, was our most popular jersey for the month of September. And he ranked 2nd in all of hockey. So good to see the new addition to the team, helping us on the merchandise side of things. I'll take a look at our monthly budget now that we're going to be playing games. We'll increase game promotions a bit. Going to keep team morale high. And we're going to start ramping up scouting a little bit, given that there's going to be a lot more hockey being played right now. Take a quick look before we finish the episode at job security. Still not in a great position as the season begins. Ownership wants us in the top half of the league, so back in the playoffs, but they think that it's a rebuild. That doesn't sound unreasonable to me. And the departure of Kane has gotten us back to an acceptable harmony situation. So all's well that ends well with the addition of Mitch Marner through free agency. Still don't have a perfect locker room. We've got a couple of clicks. We've got an unpopular player with our backup goalie. Outspoken Dylan Holloway and disruptive Alex Formenton is back. But we do have 5 leaders on the team right now. So hopefully some of those guys, most notably the new captain, Mitch Marner, will be able to get this locker room under control. And we will be starting off the new season tomorrow night at Winnipeg. and we will find out how we do in that first game and the opening months of the season in our next episode. Until then, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.